Hi, this is Eric Wiltshire from the University of Oregon, and I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about Zoom rehearsals. What we're doing with this is a rehearsal on Zoom where students get to play. They're playing along, they're active, they're involved. We can't have them play together because Zoom just doesn't allow it. The internet latency is not a problem we've been able to solve. But where they're able to play and move forward and progress in a way that feels relatively natural within this weird remote world that we're living in right now. Um, so basically how it works is rehearsals are structured like you would normally structure a rehearsal. You're going to have your goals, you're going to have different segments of music that you want to work on, and that it requires a lot of planning up front from the director. So you're going to know exactly what you're working on. We're working on this tune, letter A to letter C. At letter A, here are my goals. And you have to really think ahead of that. You need to do some serious score study that allows you to predict what the problems are going to be. You're not going to get feedback from students. You're not going to hear them play because the latency issues don't allow it. They're going to play with their microphone muted. They're going to hear a recording, and they're in their headphones, and what they're playing, they're going to feel like they're in the ensemble, but you're not going to hear what they're doing. So you have to predict what kind of problems they're going to have. You can also solve that by asking them and also watching them while they're playing. You'll be able to see their box, and that'll be a big help. Um, the music in this system is broken down into small phrases so that you're rehearsing one phrase at a time and then gradually building them up. And that's usually going to be a really helpful way to get through rehearsal anyway. It's what I've found is as I'm putting this together, it's forcing me into more organized rehearsals. And so it's the things that I normally would say, but I've really had to pre-think them and really be aware of what's going on, and spend some time really predicting what's going on. The goal here is, like with every rehearsal, keep the students playing. I want to keep, as I'm teaching these lessons, I want to keep my talk to a minimum, their activity to a maximum, so that they're getting lots of reps on the music, and they understand what my expectations are. They understand what the music needs and what they need to do, and then they're going to get lots of chances to practice that and work on developing the skills that they need to be able to succeed. um, Playing segments should be fairly short. You're using them to teach the students in a lot of ways how to practice. So you don't get the feedback from them, so you don't know what they're actually doing. So the goal is going to be to really have them understand what you're after so that they can solve their own problems. And if you add to this a rubric and reflection on their playing, especially if you can get them to record and listen back to their own playing, that's going to help them advance as well. A lot of what we're going to be able to do in this is not ensemble skills as much as it's really working on individual skills. But if we get those individual skills improving, the ensemble skills are going to come when we're able to be back in a room all together, which of course is what I'm waiting for. Um, as I said, the limitations on this are feedback. You're not going to hear what they're doing, and so you've got to do a lot of watching. What's in the window is going to be real. Are they sitting up straight? You can correct those kinds of things. Use their name, and and let them know when they're sitting up, not sitting up straight. If their embouchure looks weird, you can do a lot of those things, and you can see if they're actively being involved. You're going to want to have the cameras on for everybody, and as I go through this, I'll talk about some ways you can do cameras off, cameras on, and keep them active in this. So let me share my screen, and let's take a look at how this looks in practice. So I'm going to share that, and I'm going to minimize that. And let's talk about what you need. From a teacher standpoint, you're going to need several applications. PowerPoint or something similar is a really convenient way that I've found to organize everything. You have everything, including your audio files, on one page, and so you don't have to switch between applications while you're doing your teaching. Everything's on that PowerPoint, which is really helpful. You're going to need some kind of a PDF reader with the ability to do screen capture. I use Preview, but you're going to want to be able to take a score or a part that you have in a digital format, in a PDF, and capture just little images from it for your presentation. And so that's kind of a necessity, is to have some kind of PDF reader where you can do screen captures. I use Finale a lot, and I find that it's really helpful in creating some of the the images that I need in the as I'm putting together these lessons. Um, you're going to need an audio editor. I use GarageBand because I'm on a Mac, and that's what it came with it, so it's there, and I've learned how to use it. And it's, once you know how to use it, it works pretty simply. BandLab is another one. Audacity is another one. Those are both free. There are free editors that you can use. I'll talk a little bit about GarageBand and how I create the audio files that we use later in this video. And of course, you need Zoom or whatever platform you're using that's similar for that. I use headphones because I think Zoom always works better when you're on headphones. You just have fewer sound problems when you are able to do that. So those are the applications that you need. The materials you're going to need is a clean audio file of the music you want to rehearse. So this starts with a model you want your students to listen to, because that's going to be a big part of it. So that model is really important. You need a PDF copy of the score and a PDF copy of all the parts. You're going to want to sometimes use images from the score and sometimes use images from the parts, and that's going to depend on what you're trying to do, what you're trying to teach, but it's helpful to have both of those. And then anything else that you might need for your lesson plan, I try and get those things all together at the beginning. And I just put them all ahead of time into a folder and then go back and create my PowerPoint. So let's take a look at a PowerPoint. This is one that I up top with the Oregon Marching Band. I use a template. So there's, it always looks the same when we get started. It's got the rehearsal number, and I've just arbitrarily started numbering them from the beginning. And then what are we going to work on? And in this case, there are two stands tunes that we're going to work on: Love Stoned and Bang Bang. So we'll start with Love Stoned. And what you see here is these are both images from the score. And what I'm doing is we've got an 8-bar introduction on this, and I want to, and everybody plays the same thing. So I want them to see what's on the page. They should be looking at their music and comparing this. So now I've got something to talk to. I can move the cursor around and direct their attention to specific places. And I've got the things that I normally say on this is, we want the short notes to be short. We want separation between all those notes every time, except the last time where we want a long note here. And I put it in red so it's really easy to see. So I'm going to give those instructions. And then over here, I have this speaker, and that's my audio file. I put a click track at the beginning of it to count it off, and then they play along. So at this point, I would say, all right, let's play it. And here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Now students are playing, hearing this in their headphones. And then that's it. And we can talk about how it went. I could click the button again and they could play it again immediately. And as that's happening, I'm watching all the boxes so that I can see that they're being active and that they're involved in the rehearsal. Once that's done, we'll go on to the next page. And now we're at letter A. And I've got specific things. There's a lot of information on this page, and I'm not going to read all of it. I'm going to direct their attention to it. I'm going to talk about the things that I think are important. In the melody, I want them to connect the notes, so I'm going to talk about those things. In the backgrounds, I like to talk about rhythmic vocabulary. And so I'm using these images that I created on Finale to help them understand how the counting works on this new rhythmic vocabulary as we get into eventually the rhythm pattern that is all right here. Um, and so we're going to work on that. I might set up a metronome. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. Sorry, I should have had that set up ahead of time, but here it is. And I can have that set right under my microphone. And we'll just say, if we're going to do this bottom, 3, 4, 1, and 2E, 3, 4, and 2E, 3, 4, and 2E, 3, and 2E, 3, 4, and I did it wrong both times, but you understand the idea. We can use that metronome. They can be counting along. Again, their microphones are muted, so you can see them, but you can't hear them, but they hear the metronome and it's in time for them. It's not synchronized among them, but what they're getting in their world is all together. And then once we've got it, once we've done that, I have a new audio clip that counts off and is now letter A. And they're reading the music, moving along with it. Again, we could do those two things. I might at the end of that, I didn't in this case, but you might at the begin at that point have another audio file that is the beginning to letter B. So the two rehearsal segments that you just did. In this case, I didn't do that. I went on to the next one. And on this example, I've got this lick that's in the woodwinds that I want to be able to have them practice. And I've set up 3 different audio files at 3 different tempos. And I did this using Finale and just changed the tempo, recorded and exported that audio so that I would have a slower version. So they have 8 times at 104 beats a minute, 8 times at 116, and then 8 times at 126. So it's working them up. I'm not expecting that they're all going to learn it during this time. What I want them to leave with is an idea of how they can spend their time working on it, how they can practice on it. I'm focused on teaching them to practice and teaching them to be picky about things and letting them know what those things I think they should be picky about are. So that's basically the process. I've got another slide here, not as many score images, but information tied directly to specific measures. And again, another thing to play along with. And moving on, get to letter D. That's the last segment of the tune. We're going to talk about that. And then at the end, I've got a full run set up so that we can count it off at the beginning and they get to do a full run of this. This is a great one to record if you can. So you can get each individual student to record it, and that's more complexity than I want to get to in this video. But if they have a recording device and they're using headphones, you end up with a recording of just them playing. If they can share that in a common file in a Dropbox or a Google Drive or something like that, then you have access to those recordings. And if you really want to get fancy, you can layer them all into an ensemble recording and then play that back for them later so they hear what they sounded like as an ensemble. I'm planning to do that with our marching band, and that'll be 200 tracks that we're layering over. And so we'll see how quickly that works. But that's where I'd like to take this. That's the basic idea of how these rehearsals work. There's some hints that I can give you with this that I think are important. You want to keep them engaged, keep them playing. You want to use their names and talk to individual students, talk to sections. One of the things you can do is if you look at this screen, we've got the trombone rhythm. If I want to work on something that's just the trombones, then I can ask everybody else, turn your camera off. And what Zoom will do is put all the cameras that are active at the top of the front page. So suddenly all the trombone players are right there in front of me. And so we can talk about that, and I can see them, and I can get them to wave or thumbs up or nod or something. So I know that they're involved in what's going on, and I'm getting interaction from them. And then we can play the segment, and I can just with them, as you would with any other rehearsal. Those other people, you want to give them something to do while they're waiting, while you're working with the trombones. Take a look at whatever issues in the music might be there for each of the different sections. Unlike a normal rehearsal, they're all muted, so even if they're talking and not engaged, they're not interrupting. So maybe that's a plus, maybe it's not, but that's where we are with this whole virtual world that we're living in. And be patient with yourself, be patient with them, because it's all technology, and sometimes things don't work the way you intended them to. And so be aware that there's going to be problems. As you're going through, especially when there's problems, it's helpful to narrate things. If you say, okay, I'm going to be on, I have two screens going, and so I'm over on my other screen and I'm moving some things around. Hold on, I will be back with you in a second. And those kinds of things, they know that the audio didn't go away. They know that there's not a technical problem happening that they need to worry about. You're just shuffling things around. And so you have to teach out loud a little bit more than you would have to live. And that's just an important, that's a helpful thing to do with Zoom. And otherwise, smile and have fun. You're doing band right there in this weird kind of way to do things. So let's talk about how to set this up. And I just showed you my really messy desktop as I look at PowerPoint. And what I want to do is start a new presentation. And close or minimize that one. Let me make this big so you don't have to look at my desktop. And what I'm going to do, sorry, moving the Zoom controls around. And now, probably you already use PowerPoint or something like it, and if you know how to do it and this is all redundant, then skip ahead in the video. But I want to be complete in everything I'm talking about, so I want to go through each step. I will bookmark this in the description for the video, so you can skip ahead to the parts of the video you want to see. I like to pick a theme. The one I like is this one, and that's mostly because the options that it gives me work really well for what I'm after. It's got a nice green and yellow kind of color scheme that works for the world I live in. And you can change those things around. But start with a title page. I'm just typing in something quick. I'm going to make that bold. I'm going to make that a little bigger, and I'm going to use center it, and then I want to make it yellow. And there's a bunch of keyboard shortcuts that I use to do that. And I'll talk through them as we go a little bit farther, but I'm going to try not to spend a whole lot of time talking about how to use PowerPoint. And then the next thing is, what are we rehearsing? And it's basic title page kind of things. The next thing that I'm going to do is, I like this all green screen, this all one color screen as a place to start. And let's create a little bit of rehearsal for the Mighty Oregon March. So not exactly the fight song, but the 1916, as Albert Perfect wrote it, whole march. So we're going to talk a little bit about the first strain. First thing I'm going to do is a text box that says what we're working on and where we are in it. And so I'll type that into my text box. You can create a text box just by clicking on that tool there. If I select all of those, I'm going to Command B to bold them, and then Shift Command greater than to make the font bigger. And I need a bigger box to do that. Now I'm going to select all of those and select my font color so that it's that nice yellow that I like. So that's where we are to start. Now, I've created ahead of time, and we'll talk about how to do this. I've created a score image from the introduction, and that's not it. I'm sorry, I want this one, sorry. And there's the score image, and I can move it around. I can resize it. I recommend using the corners to resize, so you're just scaling it rather than mushing it together. I find that really disrupts the way it looks. And so now I've got the cornets and the trombone parts, and everything's there that I want to talk about, because virtually everybody does that thing. So I've now got a score image, and I created in Finale this image that's got the counting, because I like to focus on how we're counting this. This is a pretty simple exercise, but it just to demonstrate what we're talking about. And you might say, okay, I want to start with that first, that counting first, and then do the score. And so you can again, create your lesson so you're presenting it in the order that you want. So I've got all those things. The last thing that I want to add is my sound clip, and we already kind of did that. It always puts it in the middle. I'm going to resize it, the little speaker, so it's a little bit smaller, and then put it over here. You can nudge things with your arrow keys just a little bit to help put them exactly where you want them. And so now I've got the counting, I've got a score image, and I've got a recording with a click of the beginning of the march. And then it just fades out, and we're ready to go on to the next one. I'm going to click my home button and a new slide back to this green screen, and I want to show you the first strain. And I took this out of the cornet part. There's that one, measure 5 and 6, and then here's 7 through 19. And I'm going to resize this, and I want it to be the same as this one. So I'm just going to superimpose it over. It needs to be just a little bit smaller. And oops, I keep picking up the wrong one. That's the one I want there. Move that one there. And now that's just the piece of the cornet part that I wanted to work on. Again, click on home. I've got my text box. I can create this Mighty Oregon March, letter A. I'm going to say with repeat, because it does repeat. That's going to remind me when I'm teaching, what was it that, what is my recording going to do, right? So these things are going to help you not get surprised about what's on your PowerPoint as you're going back and teaching it. And then I can create a text box here. This creates a nice little area for me to put instructions, right? Instructions here. And again, bold, I'm going to change that font to this one because I like that font. And I've got a sound file that I already created that is right here. And so now I'm going to talk about what are we working on with this, and I'm specifically with the trumpet part, and I might have everybody else turn their screens off. So I'm just looking at the trumpets or the cornets, and we've got to click. Right, flutes and clarinets, piccolo are all in that as well. So I might have all of them do that. And I like having that fade in because that seems to be really helpful. It helps them feel the connection between the previous section and the section that they're on. So that's the basic idea for the PowerPoint. You're going to go through that whole thing. And again, at the end, a full run with your sound file, your audio file down at the bottom. you may choose to do it a different way, and whatever works for you is going to be what works best for you. But this is what I've been doing. The next thing that I want to do is talk about how to create the images, the score images. So I'm going to open up this score, and I've got a full score for this Mighty Oregon March. And if I want to select what the image that we used already, the cornet parts and the trombone part, that works well on this score. I'm going to zoom it in so that I've got a fairly big picture that I'm working from. And then in preview, and again, this is preview, other applications are going to work a little bit differently, but you should be able to find, take a screenshot, right? So I'm going to File, Screenshot, from Selection. And now I'm going to drag over the section of the screen that I want to capture, and there it is. Now I don't like it because I cut off the top, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that without saving it, and I'm going to try it again. So File, Screenshot, Selection, start a little higher here, and now I've got a better set for that, and I'm happy with that screenshot. So I'm going to click on the title where it says Untitled. I'm going to call it Mighty Oregon March, measure 1 through 4. It's going to save it onto the desktop for me. And so now I have that clip. It's on the desktop, or you could save it directly to a file or wherever you need to be. Similar thing with the cornet part, right? Again, I've got individual parts. I'm going to do that the same way. Really easy. You just capture the image that you need, and then you've got it. And once you have those images, you can slide those right into your PowerPoint. If you're working from Finale, and Sibelius, I think, is similar, and I think there's all kinds of options that people use. But to create a graphic from Finale, you want to write whatever it is that you want, and I've used the lyric tool to put the counts underneath the notes here. And then I'm going to click on this graphic tool. If I hover over it, there it is. It's going to tell me that's the graphics tool. And on this one, you're going to double click and drag. So I've double clicked. Now I'm dragging. And it puts a box around it. And then, sorry, my zoom controls are in the way again. Let me put that there. Okay. Go to the graphics pull down menu, export selection. And the type is, I like TIFF. That seems to work the best. PDF, you can do some of those others, but I recommend just leave it in TIFF. Your file names, it's going to generate it from the title of your file. So mine's Untitled, which is why it says Untitled here. I just have it prompt for each name. You can tell it where to save. If I click on that, it's going to give me the desktop as the default, because that's where I saved last, and I'm going to leave it as that. So I'll click Open. And then PostScript options, you don't need to worry about, and your resolution, 300 is the default, and that's going to be great. So if I click OK, it's going to allow me to name this. And I'll call it 1 through 4 counting. Again, it's going to put it on the desktop. And I've now created a graphic that looks exactly like that. And again, it's pretty much that easy. You can drag that file, that graphic right into your PowerPoint. You can also drag any of these into a Word document, or they're really portable, and that's the point. So we've got those 3 things. We talked about PowerPoint. We've talked about creating your score images, and we've talked about using finale. So the last step is to create our audio file. So I'm going to open GarageBand. Again, there are lots of other options that you can use if you don't have GarageBand or if you don't like GarageBand. This is what I use, so I'll talk my way through it. As it's opening, there it is. And I'm going to go to New Project. And I'm just going to pick the piano one. There's several templates, but we'll choose that one. And it's going to open a file, and I'm going to call it Mighty Oregon March Clips, and save it to the desktop. That's fine. This stuff down here, tempo, time signature, key, you don't need to worry about that. It's fine. However, whatever it's on the default right now, and that's fine. So I'm going to create that. I'm going to replace the one that's already there because that's fine. And it opens up this workstation for me. It starts with grand piano, and that's fine. We don't need to worry about that right now. It may give you a little keyboard that pops up here, and you don't need that. You can click on the red button to close that if it opens up for you. Other things that you should do right away is the default is it's going to give you measures. So this is 1 2 3 4 2 2 3 4. You don't want that. You're going to want time because you're dealing with a pre-recorded track. So if you click down here on this little window here, click on time, it's going to change our track up here to seconds rather than counts. And then there's a metronome function that is by default on. And so I clicked on that, and so now it's no longer blue, which means that our metronome is off. And that's good because using pre-recorded tracks, it's really hard to get the metronome to all line up. So I've got that. It's now ready to go. I'm going to take my march, and here it is. So here's the full recording of that march done by the Oregon Wind Ensemble, Bob Ponto conducting. And there it is. So I'm going to click right. So we've got our file right there. So we'll talk about editing that file. Let me talk just a little bit about how that works. What you can see right now is when it's dark, that means that's the track that I'm dealing with, and I can click and drag it and move it around along that timeline. That's one way of moving it around. You can also click like this, and you get this arrows pointing two directions thing, and what you're doing is changing where the sound starts within the track. So the whole track is always there when you do this, right? So you don't have to worry about ever deleting the whole track. If you've got any of the track, you've got all of the track all the time. So don't worry that any of the editing you're going to do is going to get rid of something you need. It's always all there, which I think is really helpful to know, and it's a really cool feature of it. So I've got my track. Oh, actually, there's one other thing. It's not going to show it to me on this side. Let's go over to this side of the track. You get this curved icon. That's for loops, and that's a different function that we don't need. So I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to say make sure that when you're messing with your track, you want to use this one, or you want to move the whole thing. You don't want to get into the loops because that does a different thing that we don't want to get into. So we've got that. Now moving along back and forth on the track just by sliding on my mouse pad or on my trackpad. And the last little bit of housekeeping is this, what we call the playhead. This is where it's going to start playing, right? So you can move that around. If I want to start at 10 seconds, I can move it there, and it starts exactly at that spot. It's a good shortcut is that your space bar will always start and pause play. So if I want to start, I can hit the space bar, and then I can pause by hitting the space bar again. So I've got my track. What I'm going to want to do is find just the introduction, because that was the first clip we needed to make. So let me put my playhead here and play through. And there it is. So two ways. So the next thing I want to do is cut the track. So I'm going to go to edit. Yes. And I'm going to split the track by clicking split. And now I've got two different tracks. I'm going to go over here, click on the one to the right, and I'm just going to click on it and hit delete. And now it's gone. But don't worry, it's still actually there. That's just a good shortcut to get rid of the part you didn't need. And I'm actually going to extend this a little bit so that it goes slightly past the introduction. So now if I move my playhead, press the space bar, right? So I've got, now this is basically the clip that I want. What we need to do is create a count off. So that's where this grand piano track is going to come in. First thing I'm going to do is click on it to highlight it, and then I'm going to click and drag it to put it down below. I'm just changing the order. You don't have to do that, but that it helps me to be consistent on where I put things. I'm going to move my playhead to the beginning. You can do that with this button here as well. And now I'm going to change this from piano to a drum kit. So if you double click that, you see how this window over here opens and closes. If I double click it, it goes away. If I double click it, it comes back. Clicking on drum kits, and then I have the options I have. One of them is rock kit. Your options may be different depending on what you've got installed on GarageBand and how often you've used it. So you may have to play around to find it. I like the rock kit because it has the sounds that I want. So I've selected that, and you can see that piano has changed now over here to rock kit. Now I'm going to click on this button down here. See me come down to the lower left-hand corner, and this is the track editor. And on the track editor, it gives you a little keyboard. And now I know that that E flat, oops, that's the D, there's the E flat. The E flat is the clave sound that I want to use for my click track. You can just put your arrow there, and I'm just using the mouse. That's one way. You can also, if you go to Window, and then you can click on Musical Typing, and that's going to give you this box here. And if you press P, it's in the wrong octave. There it is. So I changed the octave on this keyboard here and click on P. So now if I press P on the keyboard, I've got my count off. Then once that's set up, make sure my playhead is at 0. I'm going to hit record, and it's going to start playing. And what I just did was record my count off. And I used the tempo on the music to make it happen. So then I can just click on it and drag it to the beginning. And then I'm going to drag this track, and then I'm going to get them aligned. And the way to do that is first down here on the left side, you've got this is going to change your resolution. So I'm going to increase the resolution just a little bit. And then what I did when I did the count off, I did a 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then one more click, and that's beat 1. And so there's my beat 1. I'm going to put my playhead right here and drag it so that it's right at the beginning of beat 1 on my click track. And then you can see where the music starts on this track. And I'm just going to drag that until it's touching the playhead, and then hit this button to move the playhead to the beginning, and what should happen is it all lines up. And if it doesn't line up the first time, move it just a little bit and you'll get, you'll find that you can get it exactly where you want. And let me do that one more time. Cool. So that's the beginning. I've got a click track on it. Now I want to do the end of the track. And to do that, we're going to put a fade in this. And to do that, I'm going to click on this, make sure I'm selecting the track that I want, and click on this little arrow here. And that didn't work. And there it is. And it's going to give me track volume. And you can see you've got a track volume line right here. What I want to do is find where's the end. Okay, so my end of the phrase is just about here. So what I'm going to do is click on the line right there. It's going to put a handle. I'm going to click on it again. It's going to put another handle. Then I can click and drag that handle down to 0, and that's my fade. So if I move my playhead over here, press the space bar to play, and you can see that I now have a fade, and I don't like where that fade is, so I'm just going to move my handles a little bit. And let me try it again, and yeah, and even that seems a little bit abrupt. It really isn't that important, but I'm going to just stretch that out a little bit, and there, and that's a smoother transition. And so now I've got my completed track for that. So I'm done with my musical typing, and so I can click the red button and it'll go away. I've hit this button to put my playhead at 0, and I'm going to press play and see what happened. And it's done, and it's what I need, and I like it, so I'm going to save it. What you want to do to save it is go to share, and I'm going to send this song to iTunes. That's a GarageBand peculiarity. It wants to do everything through iTunes because it's Apple and they want everything to share. If you're using something else, you'd be sending it to, you'd be choosing a destination for a file. For the playlist, I'm going to rename the playlist with my same title I've been using, Mighty Oregon March Clips. I'm going to use the MP3 encoder. I'm going to choose higher quality. Good, high quality, and higher quality are the options. I choose the higher one because I do want the sound to be the best we can make it. And because these are usually short clips, it doesn't become too big of a problem. And then I'm going to click share. Now, what it's doing right now is sending that track to iTunes, which it just opened up for me automatically. And I already had a playlist called that because I already created these. Oh, here it is. And that's the track I just created. And I'm going to rename it measure 1 through 4. So then I know exactly what it is. And now I've created my first track. Now, after that, it's pretty easy. Let me move again my Zoom controls. I'm recording this on Zoom, which is actually pretty slick. So now I've got my track, and remember, it's always the whole track. So I'm going to click on it. I've got it at the beginning. I want to see the arrows pointing both directions. And I'm just going to drag that all the way to where I was. And now I'm going to pull that back and leave it just about here. And then I want to go through the first ending and the repeat. I'm going to do the repeat of this, so it's going to be quite a ways down the line. And I'm just going to listen. And I can't hear it because it still has my fade. So I'm gonna, here's what I just did there. Sorry, I should tell you what I'm doing. I'm gonna click and drag over those handles, hit delete, and it's gonna take those away. So now I no longer have that fade. I can put a new one in later, and let's see. And that's the second strain starting right there. So that's about where I want to be. I'm going to make sure I'm selecting the track, and then I can either go up to edit and split, or I can do Command T and it'll split it. And again, this part I don't need. I'm going to highlight, or I'm just going to select and then delete. And I'm going to extend that just a little bit. And I'm not going to worry about the fade until I get the beginning. So now I've got my count off. It hasn't changed because the tempo hasn't changed. So I don't need to mess with it, but I have to place the track in the right place. And I need to go backwards just a little bit more. Find my intro. There it is. Now, for this one, I'm going to use a trick. There's a pickup, and that's on beat 2. And so that's going to be this beat here. So I'm going to put my playhead here. And if I remember right, those pickups were right there. So I don't always have to line up with one, can line up with whatever the easiest to find beat is. And let's go back here. Let's do just a little bit of shifting and play from the beginning. Here's my click. Cool. And now, I don't want it to start quite so abruptly, but I do want to make sure I hear those pickups. So I'm going to put a handle there. I'm going to put a handle over here, drag that down. So we're starting, there's nothing here to hear. We're going to start at 0 and come up to our basic baseline volume during the count off, and that should give me a nice fade in over the click. So now we're ready to go, and we can go to the end of the clip, and we've already been there, so we know, and that's where we want our fade. So I'm going to put a handle, put another handle, add my fade, back up just a little bit, move my playhead, press the space bar. And now we've got our second track done. And it takes some time. As you get better at it, it takes less and less time. And I do recommend that you go back and listen to the whole thing. We won't do all of that, but I'm going to listen to the beginning one more time, make sure it's what I want. And then everything's good. And I scroll along and get to the end, and good. And then now I've got my next track, and same way, I'm going to send it to iTunes. It's going to give me that same playlist, all the same settings. So all I have to do is click share. And again, it's going to open iTunes up and start playing it is the default. And I'm going to rename it. Cool. And I called that letter A with the repeat. And now I have the sound clips that I need for those first couple tracks that we were just talking about. So if you think back to what we did earlier, I'm now telling you how I created all of those clips. If we go back to the PowerPoint, right? So you see all of those things that we just created are the things that I've now inserted into my PowerPoint. And so then once I'm ready to teach, I'm just use everything that I need is right here. Students are looking at the sheet music. They've either got it on paper or digital. It's best if they're not using the same device to look at a digital copy and the Zoom, because it's too hard without multiple screens. If they've got multiple screens, that works a little better. But for you, everything is there. You can't see it on your screen because of how the Zoom recording works, but I can see what they're all up to, and all the information is there. So that's basically the process. This is a longer video than I intended, but I'll make sure it's bookmarked. Please let me know if you've got questions. I would love to hear from you. Send me an email. It's in the description below. And I hope this is helpful for you as we move through these difficult Zoom virtual band kinds of times. So thanks a lot, and good luck with the fall.